That night, a strange kind of stillness hung over the broken Mesa Ranch, a silence heavy enough to warn any sensible man that trouble was on the wind. Rancher Cole Merrick stood on his porch, his thumb hooked in his belt, watching the horizon swallow the last sliver of daylight. The sky glowed a deep copper and fading gold over the jagged ridges. It should have been a beautiful sight. But tonight, it wasn't, because he knew exactly where his daughter was, and he knew what waited for her beyond those ridges. Cole's voice cracked as he whispered into the cooling air, "Lord, just keep her safe until I can bring her home." Inside the small ranch house, lantern light flickered against the walls, casting long, dancing shadows. They stretched across the framed photograph on the mantel, a picture of Cole's late wife, Mary, holding a toddler with stubborn eyes and wind-blown hair, their daughter, Abigail Merrick, now a young woman with that very same stubborn fire burning in her soul. A fire Cole feared might just destroy her if she wasn't careful. Abby had left an hour earlier. She'd ridden off without a word, but Cole knew why she'd gone. She had heard the name Jax Ryland. And for a Merrick, hearing that name was enough to send them riding straight toward danger. For years, Cole had tried to hide the truth that Jax, the outlaw wanted in 3 counties, was the same boy he once treated like a son. A boy who'd grown up working this very ranch, sleeping in the barn, learning to rope and ride and shoot right alongside Cole. A boy who had vanished into the night years ago. The same night Cole found him holding a bag of stolen money, his shirt stained with blood. Cole had raised Abigail to stay away from outlaws, to trust the law, to believe in a clear line between right and wrong. But she'd learned the truth just a week ago, after overhearing 2 ranch hands talking about Cole's old stray kid who'd gone bad. She'd confronted her father, her eyes flashing with hurt and confusion. He'd said only one thing, his voice low and firm, "Turn back from that life, Abby. Don't ever go looking for a past that already broke us." But Abigail wasn't built like that. She wasn't built to turn away from the truth, or from someone who was hurting. And hunted by the vicious Kempner gang after he'd stolen something from them. Something valuable enough to get him killed. So she rode out, straight into outlaw territory. Back on the porch, Cole grabbed his worn hat from the peg, slung his rifle over his shoulder, and stepped into the yard. Boone, his old chestnut gelding, whinnied softly, as if he already knew a long, hard night lay ahead. Before Cole could swing into the saddle, a voice called out from the darkness, "Evenin', Cole, you heard." It was Sheriff Amos Tully, riding up slow, the dust from his horse settling in the twilight. Cole's jaw tensed. "If you're here about Jax, I don't need the warning. I need your help." The sheriff adjusted his hat, his gaze steady. "I ain't here to talk you down. Truth is, I'm worried about the girl. Abby's brave, Cole, but she ain't ready for the kind of men run in that canyon." A heavy weight settled in Cole's chest. "No child of mine is dying out there, not tonight." They rode out together, their horses' hooves pounding a desperate rhythm under a sky filling with rising stars. The vast land stretched out around them, sagebrush trembled in the wind, and the distant calls of coyotes echoed across the plains. There was a faint smell of rain on the air, carried from somewhere far off. Every sound seemed too loud, too sharp, as if the whole world sensed what was coming. Meanwhile, deep inside the winding outlaw canyons, Abigail slowed her horse to a careful, quiet trot. Her heart thudded harder with every echo that answered her from the towering stone walls. In the moonlight, shadows twisted and writhed, looking like figures waiting to pounce. She'd been raised on wide-open, honest ranch land. These canyons were a different world entirely. Everything felt like an ambush waiting to happen, and then she saw it. A dark smear on the dirt, blood, fresh. Her breath caught in her throat as she slid from her horse. Her fingers brushed the ground, the soil still damp. The trail led between 2 towering rocks, a narrow, treacherous pass that only a desperate man would dare to take. "Jax," she whispered, her own voice tight with fear. She didn't have time for another thought. The sharp, unmistakable click of a gun cocking sounded right behind her. Drop the reins, girl, real slow. Abigail froze, every muscle in her body screaming. A figure stepped out from the shadows, tall, thin, and dressed in a tattered black coat. His eyes were as sharp and cold as broken glass. It was a face she recognized from a wanted poster. A member of the Kempner gang. Look in for someone. He sneered, his voice dripping with menace. Abby swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. Just passing through. No one just passes through here. His grin widened, a cruel slash in the darkness. But you might just be the bait we've been needing. Before she could even think to run, another outlaw stepped out from behind a rock and yanked her arms back. The air burst from her lungs in a gasp of shock as they roughly tied her wrists with coarse rope. Back on the ridge, miles away, Cole's horse stopped abruptly, its ears twitching. A faint echo had reached them, a cry, sharp and terrified, swallowed almost instantly by the vastness of the canyon walls. Cole's heart dropped into his stomach. He knew that sound. Abby, he breathed, his voice a raw whisper. He kicked Boone hard, urging the horse into a reckless gallop, racing toward the sound with the sheriff thundering close behind him. But the canyon was a maze of stone and shadow, and the night was closing in fast. Abigail fought against the ropes digging into her wrists, her breath coming in ragged bursts. Her eyes, however, were full of fear and fury both. "Where are you taking me?" she demanded, her voice shaking but defiant. The outlaw with the broken glass eyes just smirked. "To the man who wants Jack's real and dead." He leaned in closer, his voice as cold as a winter grave. "And you, little lady, are how we're gonna draw him out." In that terrifying moment, Abigail's heartbeat hammered like a drum against her ribs. Because she suddenly realized the chilling truth. Jax wasn't just running from the Kempers. He must have taken something from them to save someone else. And now, she not him was the one caught in the crosshairs. The outlaws shoved her forward, deeper into the suffocating darkness of the canyon. The wind began to howl through the rock formations. Thunder rolled in the distance, a low growl of the coming storm. And miles behind her, her father rode faster than his old bones should have allowed, his heart pounding with a single, desperate prayer that he wasn't already too late. The canyon swallowed the night. Guided between towering stone walls, Abigail Merrick felt the darkness press in on all sides. Her wrists were tied, but the knots were loose, more for show than anything else. It was intimidation, not injury, that these outlaws intended. Fear tightened her breath, but she kept her chin lifted, a quiet strength her father always said she inherited from her late mother. The men led her toward a narrow pass. A single lantern swung in the wind, its lonely light throwing long, restless shadows across the rock. They looked like spirits dancing on the canyon walls. "Keep moving," one of the outlaws muttered. His face was scarred, his voice more impatient than cruel. Abigail stumbled on a loose stone, but caught her balance quickly. She looked at him, her voice soft but firm. "You don't have to do this." "I'm not who you think I am," the outlaw just huffed, a sound of weary frustration. "Miss, you don't know the half of it. You Merricks always get pulled into that boy's troubles." Abigail's heart skipped a beat at the familiar weight behind those words. Jax. Before she could ask what he meant, they pushed her through the lantern-lit gap and into the hideout. It wasn't the chaotic camp she'd imagined. This place was organized, a temporary base tucked neatly between the rocks. Horses stood quietly at a rail. Tents, patched with old canvas, formed a neat half-circle. Crates sat stacked under tarps. The air was tense, but it was the tension of men waiting for answers, not a brawl. The outlaws gathered around a small fire looked up as she entered, their expressions more curious than hostile. Then, a large figure emerged from the largest tent. He was broad-shouldered and stern, carrying the unmistakable aura of a man used to being obeyed. Marcus Kemper. But, as he stepped into the firelight, Abigail saw that his eyes, though cold, didn't hold the malice she'd braced herself for. It was something else. Frustration. maybe even desperation. "So," he said, his voice a low rumble, "this is the young lady who rode straight into a place she shouldn't have. You have no right to keep me here," Abigail replied, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest. Kempner removed his hat, dusting it off with an absent-minded gesture. "Maybe not, but you might just help us clear up a situation." A situation involving Jax. Abigail stiffened. The name hung in the air between them. Kemmer let out a sigh. He took something important, a ledger. "It's got names of folks who've been buying supplies from us. Nothing unlawful. Mind you, just business we'd rather keep private." He thinks handing it to the sheriff will somehow make up for his past mistakes. He motioned calmly toward a small storage shed reinforced with iron bars. "We need to talk to him, and you're someone he actually listens to." Two of his men gently guided Abigail inside. They weren't rough, just firm, making sure she stayed put. The door closed with a heavy thud. Leaning her forehead against the cool iron bars, Abigail whispered into the darkness, "Jax, please don't do anything rash." Miles away, the storm was picking up. Winds howled through the canyon like a distant, angry thunder. Cole Merrick urged his horse forward, his face grim. Sheriff Tully rode up beside him, raising a hand to slow him down. "Cole, slow down. These paths can slip in the rain." But Cole didn't stop. "My daughter's out there, Amos. I can't waste time." Tully guided his horse closer, his expression serious. "I get it, truly. But a clear head is what'll get her back safe." Cole finally reined in his horse, his breathing heavy. Rain trickled down his coat sleeves, cold against his skin. For the first time, fear cracked his hardened voice. "She's all I have left, Amos. If anything happens to her," Tully placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "We're getting her back, but I need to know the truth. Jax is mixed up in this, isn't he?" Cole hesitated for a long moment, then gave a slow, reluctant nod. "He's a confused boy, Amos, lost, but Abby, she still believes there's good in him. Do you?" The sheriff asked gently, his gaze fixed on Cole's. Cole stared into the canyon's dark, gaping mouth. "I want to," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. Just then, a sharp crack echoed through the rocks, like the sound of wood splitting under pressure. Cole's head snapped up. That came from the hideout. Without another word, he kicked his horse into a hard gallop, charging into the storm. Back at the hideout, the Khmer gang was settling down for the night. The atmosphere was quiet, almost peaceful, until a shot rang out. A bullet splintered a wooden crate near the fire, a warning shot, meant to startle, not to harm. The men scrambled to their feet, grabbing their rifles. A second shot landed in the dirt at their feet, another signal. All eyes turned toward the ridge overlooking the camp. A lone figure stepped into view, silhouetted against the stormy sky. He was soaking wet, his coat whipping in the wind. Jax Ryland. He raised his voice, shouting to be heard over the wind, "I'm here. Let the girl go, and we'll talk." Kemmer stepped forward, shaking his head with a frustrated sigh. "Jax, you could have just come down and spoken like a man. You weren't exactly inviting me to tea." Jax shot back, keeping a respectful but safe distance. The outlaws held their positions, weapons ready, but no one fired. Their faces were tense, watchful, but not violent. From inside the shed, Abigail pressed her face to the bars, her heart pounding. "Jax, don't risk yourself." His eyes found hers across the camp, a brief, heartfelt look that said everything. He then turned his attention back to Kemper. "I brought the ledger. I'll hand it over, but she goes home safe. That's the deal." A low murmur went through the gang. Kemper raised a hand to silence them. But before he could make a decision, one of his men slipped behind Abigail's shed, blocking the door. He wasn't hurting her, just standing guard. "Boss," he called out, his voice tense. "If Ryland's got the ledger, we should make sure she doesn't leave until it's in our hands." Abigail froze. The air grew thick with unspoken threats. Jax's expression tightened, not with anger, but with pure, unadulterated worry. He took a single step forward, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous quiet. Don't involve her any further. The standoff was fragile, a delicate balance of desperation and hope. And at that very moment, miles away, Cole Merrick was riding faster and faster through the canyon, completely unaware of the dangerous web closing in around his daughter. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. See you next time. The storm clouds began to break as dawn pushed a pale glow across the stone walls of the canyon. I sat inside the small wooden shed, my hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of everything I now understood. Jax hadn't come into this canyon for recklessness or pride. He came because he cared, because he couldn't leave me behind. Outside, the chaos from the night had faded into an uneasy stillness. Angry shouts had grown distant, boots pounded against the canyon floor. The outlaws were scattered, unsure, their confidence shaken after Jax's unexpected arrival. I pressed my face to the barred window again, my voice a desperate whisper. "Jax, please be safe," a soft voice answered from behind me. "I'm right here." I spun around. Jax stood at the shed door, bruised and tired, but alive. His eyes carried guilt and hope in equal measure. He found a way to slip past the remaining guards when the gang split up, unsure where the sheriff's forces were coming from. I rushed forward as he loosened the latch and opened the door. "How did you? It doesn't matter," he said quietly, his gaze sweeping over the canyon. "We need to get you out before they regroup." But I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "No, Jax, we're leaving together. My father, he needs to hear the truth from you." Jax looked away, a familiar struggle crossing his features. "Abby, I ain't sure your father wants any truth from me." I stepped closer, until I could almost feel the years of regret he carried. "He will, because deep down, he still sees the boy he raised. Even if you can't see him yourself." For a moment, Jax didn't speak. The firelight from the dying camp flickered across his face, softening the hard lines etched by years on the run. Then a distant whistle cut through the canyon, a sharp, clear signal. Jax tensed immediately. "That's Tully. And your father." My heartbeat quickened. "Then let's go." Together, we slipped between the rocks, following a narrow path toward the canyon's mouth. Every footstep echoed with the weight of what waited ahead. Reunion, judgment, and maybe, just maybe, forgiveness. As we rounded a bend, we saw them, figures on horseback approaching, their forms silhouetted against the rising sun. The sheriff rode first, a lantern raised high. And beside him was Cole Merrick, my father. Emotion rose in my chest, a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees. "Papa," he dismounted before his horse even stopped, rushing toward me. He pulled me into a tight embrace, the kind only a father who nearly lost his child could give. I thought his voice cracked, rough with emotion. "Abby, thank God you're safe." I held him, tears finally slipping down my cheeks. "I'm here, Papa. I'm safe." When he finally let me go, his eyes shifted serious, guarded to Jax, who stood a few paces back. His hands were empty, his shoulders lowered in a posture of surrender. Jax bowed his head, his gaze fixed on the ground. "Mr. Merrick, I ain't expecting forgiveness. But Abby's right, you deserve the truth." My father's jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. "I'm listening." Jax took a breath, steadying himself. The words came out slow, measured, each one a heavy stone he'd carried for years. "I left your ranch 'cause I made mistakes. Not the kind you can hide behind excuses. I got mixed up with the wrong folks, and when I realized what they planned, I took something from them to set it right. It put a target on me, and on anyone close to me. That's why I stayed away." He glanced at me, his eyes full of a pain that mirrored my own, then back at my father. "But Abby rode after me. She didn't deserve any of this." The canyon was quiet, except for the soft whistle of the morning wind through the rocks. My father stepped closer to Jax, his shadow falling over him. "You should have come to me. Jax, You were like a son once. Jack swallowed hard, a flicker of the boy he used to be in his eyes. I know, sir, I just didn't think I'd earned that any more. For a long, agonizing moment, my father simply studied him. The young man he'd raised, the boy who'd lost his way, the one who'd risked everything to protect his daughter. Finally, he let out a long sigh, the kind of sigh that released years of anger he no longer wanted to carry. Jax, mistakes don't decide a man. What he does afterward does. Jax looked up slowly, a fragile hope flickering in his eyes. My father extended a hand. Let's set things right. Together. Jack stared at the outstretched hand as if it were a mirage. Then, he grasped it firmly, emotion tightening his throat, his knuckles white. I smiled, a genuine, bone-deep smile, and felt a relief so profound it washed over me like the first warmth of the morning sun. Sheriff Tully cleared his throat, lifting the leather-bound ledger Jax had recovered. Well, I reckon we've got work to do. These names will clean up half the trouble in this territory. My father nodded, his hand still on Jax's shoulder. And Jax will help us finish what he started. Jax exhaled, a quiet, grateful breath. Yes, sir. I will. As the sun finally crested the canyon rim, its golden light spilled over the stones, washing away the darkness of the night. I stepped beside Jax, our shoulders brushing softly. You came for me, I whispered, the words more a statement than a question. Always, he replied, his voice low and certain. We started out of the canyon together, father, daughter, outlaw turned redemption seeker, as the dawn welcomed us into a new beginning. As we rode toward the horizon, I glanced back only once, watching the shadows of the canyon fade behind us. Some places were meant to be left in the dark, but some people deserved a chance to step into the light. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of the Old West. Until next time.